Everybody, welcome back. My name is Matthew. If you're here for the first time, welcome. So I'm a tech executive who became successful in the tech industry and then quit, and am now doing sort of nutrition and wellness coaching for people. And I was a little tired of not having a space to help impact the world and help people out. So I started this. It's basically a weekly stream where I talk about kind of whatever. Sometimes I take community questions and talk about science, different topics that people have questions about. And our sort of overall goal is to be an underground insurgency that is hell bent on healing ourselves and healing other people as well. I think there can be an imbalance that happens when we just focus on ourselves, and there can be an imbalance that happens when we just focus on other people. So I'm trying to strike that balance with this. So we'll talk about topics that will help us, and then we'll also talk about topics that will help the people around us. So that's basically what we're doing here. So this week's topic, we just got done with a few weeks of answering community questions. We had a question come in about sort of origin of life stuff and how the Earth was put together and how long it took and everything. I'm also going to experiment this time with muting when I drink coffee. So let's try that. All right, I'm gonna have to go back and see if that actually go back to the recording and see if you could hear that. But yeah, the swallowing as I was listening back to this was kind of bugging me. So anyway, so this week, after a few weeks of answering community questions, I'm going to get back to a topic that has come up from a few of you here and there, and it's also something I'm actively working on. So I thought it would be a good chance to talk about it. But basically, the science of motivation, that kind of feeling of I know what I need to do, but I don't do it. This happens a lot with the kind of coaching that I'm doing now, where people know cognitively the steps that they need to or want to take, but they just end up not taking them. And so we're going to dig into that a little bit. So I'm just going to go for it. So the first thing I want to do is clarify what motivation is. So motivation is this very interesting thing in our brain chemistry, and it's almost kind of like a default way that everyone sees the world, which is essentially to do this very, very quick, on the fly, real time, in the moment, cost benefit analysis with pretty much everything. If I'm going to go down and get a cup of coffee, if I'm going to go visit my family, if I'm going to try to initiate sex with my wife or anything like that, there's this cost benefit analysis, even as something as simple as like, what am I going to make for breakfast? Should I just grab like a protein bar? Should I actually make some eggs? Should I make my normal meal? Should I make a smoothie? Like every kind of decision that you make throughout the day, you're motivated to select different options for that based on this cost benefit analysis that your brain does. So essentially kind of all throughout the day, and then also with career choices and relationship choices and all kinds of stuff, your brain is doing this very quick calculus. It's like basically just brain math happening. And so like when you're like, should I go to the gym today, or should I eat healthy today, or should I go to the movie? Should I spend this money on this movie or video game or whatever it is? You're doing that mental calculus brain math thing. I'm going to mute it again. I feel like that might be more awkward than just swallowing. So anyway, I'll experiment with it. So that brain math is basically an equation, and what you're basically doing is trying to figure out how much that thing will cost me, and how confident am I that I'm going to get the outcome that I want, and then also taking that times the value of whatever the thing is. So anything that increases the confidence that you'll actually get the thing, like if I initiate sex with my wife, but I don't feel like she's actually going to be favorable to that, so that confidence goes down, then the motivation to actually initiate that goes down as well. So anything that boosts the confidence or boosts the value, or the meaning or the reward is another way of saying value, or decreases the cost, especially even just the perceived cost, regardless of what it actually costs, but just the perceived cost, will increase motivation. So anything that increases the confidence that you'll get what you want, or increase the value of what you're getting, or decrease the cost or the perceived cost of what you're needing to do to get that thing, will increase motivation. And then another thing that people don't talk about much that I did want to mention is that that's not the whole picture. Anything that really optimizes your brain chemistry overall or your biochemistry overall will make these calculations feel easier to you, and that will also increase motivation. So what that basically means is that if you're in a healthy space as a human being, if you're in a good spot socially, health-wise, everything's kind of firing on all thrusters, then your motivation overall just goes up because the brain chemistry calculations that you're doing on a minute-to-minute, second-by-second basis are just easier to do. So this is why I think a lot of successful people continue to be successful and they kind of exponentially become successful over time, is because they then have the resources to optimize their body and their brain and their life in such a way that doing all of this brain math actually becomes much easier for them. So I'm going to give you a concrete example here. So let's say, to illustrate this equation, so let's say I say that I will give you $1 million, and this is an actual photo of $1 million that was seized by a police department. So not huge, doesn't even cover a table. So let's say I promise you $1 million. And in order to get that, so that's the value. And let's say that I ask you to wrestle and kill 10 alligators in order to get this $1 million. That would be the cost. The confidence in that outcome of successfully being able to do that would probably be pretty low. And so therefore, because that's pretty low, the motivation is low. So high cost, low confidence. So the motivation is generally low. If I change this a little bit, and say, instead of 10 crocodiles, you only need to wrestle and kill one crocodile. So then the cost goes down, the confidence in the outcome goes up, and the value stays the same. So in that case, you might be more tempted to do it, but you might still not be that motivated to do it. But if I really reduce the cost, then that increases your confidence in the outcomes. So basically, if I said, I will give you $1 million if you can successfully break this toothpick, well, then the cost goes down because it basically doesn't really cost you much, just a little energy to break a toothpick. You're highly confident that you can actually do it, and the value stays the same. So the motivation in that case goes up. So this mental calculus that people do invisibly to themselves often is what motivation is. It's just brain math. People think of motivation as like, you need to be inspired and you need to like do all these things. And that's not really what it is. Motivation is really just a math equation that your brain is constantly doing. And these are the components of the equation. And then on this last point that I mentioned earlier, anything that optimizes your brain chemistry will make these calculations in general feel easier. And by doing so, you increase motivation. This is why basically like business works. Like you see all the kind of cliche, backdoor meetings and people like whining and dining people and schmoozing and different things, where you're like having a great time with the investors and like drinking and making jokes, and like if you can work that social situation, then they like give you money and all that. The whole reason why all of that stuff works, and it does work, it's how politics works, and a lot of different business initiatives work, is because, including sales, is because that process of socializing and sort of connecting with people in that way really increases your brain chemistry baseline. And so this kind of these motivation calculations feel easier. So you might be more motivated to donate or give money or invest or whatever it is. So that's the whole point of why these things work, is it makes this whole equation, it changes this entire equation, and it dramatically affects motivation as a result. So that's basically what motivation is. And so I'm going to go into next the hardware layer of this. This math equation that your brain is doing has these components, but there's like a hardware layer that is driving the whole thing. And so we're going to go and break that down real quick. This is especially important when you're talking about your own motivation. So if you are trying to accomplish a goal or become a doctor or finish a degree or start a business or whatever it is, I'm going to just drink and swallow. So hope that doesn't suck. If you're trying to do anything, your own personal motivation and keeping that motivation high throughout the week, throughout the months, throughout the years, 5 years in, are you still motivated? All of those questions. We're going to kind of go through all of the different components to keep motivation high or jumpstart motivation back into action. So the neurobiological levers, which are the hardware layer, the first one is a dopamine pulse, which is your ventral tegmental area and your nucleus accumbens. And there's a whole circuit for this, and we'll go into the details of this in just a second. But this is basically the foundation of motivation in general, the biological foundation of it. And I wanted to explain something about dopamine real quick because I don't know if people super understand often how dopamine works. What you want with dopamine is you want a rise with a slow decline. What you don't really want is a short spike, because if you have a short, fast spike, then you have a fast drop off and it usually dips below baseline. So something that raises your dopamine levels relatively slowly and has a long tail, then you don't really dip below baseline. So things that like social connection, having sex, making out, even listening to music, those sorts of things have a much slower dopamine rise and release cycle. Certain foods like raspberries and a few things do the same thing. But then like pounding a bag of M&Ms or something like this will do this. So it's like a very sharp up and then a crash down that's fast, and it dips you below baseline, and it takes your body a while to recover. So what you want to try to do is these slower builds and long-tailed releases. But overall, what you want to do is have like a series of them. And what you definitely do not want to do is try to have a sustained dopamine release thing. Like you hear people talking about like doing dopamine cleanses and all kinds of different stuff. But throughout your day and throughout your week and throughout your month, what you want to do is have smaller ups so you don't have as much of a down, because if you try to push your dopamine high and then keep it up for a sustained period, what happens is it crashes down and then you stay below baseline for a long time. And this is like a motivation killer. As I said, it's the foundation. So anyone who is trying to push their dopamine too high or has in the past and has come down and is in this area down here, it's pretty much impossible to get the motivation to work on your business, do your degree, get off the couch, like whatever it is. And that's just a chemical reality of what's happening in your brain. So if you're having some motivation issues, you might think and take a look at where you're trying to push your dopamine high. Are you like eating sweets and then also going to a coffee shop and then also listening to music and then also like looking at porn or whatever, all those different kind of dopamine things, and you're trying to keep your dopamine like at a high level? If you're trying to do that for an extended period of time, you will eventually crash and you will eventually not have much motivation at all. And the other dangerous thing about doing it this way is this baseline can actually shift down. So you can have, if you keep doing this cycle over and over again, where you keep trying to push it higher and higher, you would think that it would raise your baseline, but that's not at all how it works. What ends up happening is your body can't really come back in the same way that it usually does, because it basically kind of flames out. And so it moves your baseline down so that it can reach baseline again. And so what you end up doing is kind of lowering and lowering and lowering your default level of dopamine. And that can also be a major motivation killer. So if you have a chronic problem with motivation, like you sort of never feel like doing anything, it might be because you've had too much extended dopamine release over and over again, and it's actually reduced your baseline down, which can take a while to fix, but it is fixable. So how do you control this kind of foundation dopamine pulse thing? As I mentioned, you want something with a long tail. So a few ideas here. Working in blocks. This has been scientifically proven to work super well. So this is basically what I do. I'll like super dial in and focus in and get into flow for like an hour to 2 hours, somewhere in that range. Anything more than that, and I really start to see diminishing returns, and so then I need to take a break. So I'll take a break. I'll go on a walk. I'll listen to a podcast. I'll read a book, like whatever kind of break thing that I want to do. But basically just breaking up work into these sections and then having something that gives more of a slow release dopamine pulse is the way to go. And then you can also bundle completing tasks with a micro reward. So like if I finish the presentation I'm working on, then I can go down and get a cup of coffee or something like that. That works tremendously well. And again, it keeps your dopamine kind of bumping up and bumping up so that you don't have a crash, which really fucks with your motivation. So that's why this kind of blocks and then micro rewards for tasks really works well. And then there's also a way to actually raise this baseline overall. So instead of going down, it actually continues to go up and up and up. So instead of migrating down further and further, you can actually raise it up higher and higher, which is awesome because then you need kind of less of this stuff and you kind of just naturally feel high energy and motivated overall if you do this. This has become popularized, but it's a thing that people, while they, I think, know they should do it or it's like become a fad to do, the science around it is solid. So basically what you want to do is when you wake up in the morning, especially around sunrise-ish time, if you can get outside and spend like 15 minutes or so outside in the sunlight in the morning, and then about 15 minutes around sunrise outside, then this will significantly help your dopamine baseline. That's just how human bodies are put together. And we'll go into why in just a second, but basically there's a lot of things that get calibrated in your body based on that because we evolved on this planet 300,000 years ago or several million years ago, depending on how you slice genus Homo or hominins. So basically, like, because of that cycle of the planet and the planet spinning toward the star and away from the star, your body really reacts to that in particular. And so a lot of your body's basically just chemistry. Your metabolism is just 1,000 chemical reactions all doing a bunch of crazy shit and influencing each other. So you're essentially just chemistry. Your body's just chemistry, and your chemistry is very, very sensitive to the light and dark cycle of sunrise and sunset. And so getting outside and actually getting some sunlight around sunrise and sunset is extremely helpful. Another thing that's helpful, and this is not anything new, but it's, again, the most solid science we have, is about 30 minutes of some sort of purposeful exercise most days. So go on a walk in your neighborhood, brisk walk for 30 minutes, do some sprints, do some strength training, play a VR video game like where you're swinging things around, like whatever it is, but do purposeful exercise. Your body evolved on this planet to survive, and in order to survive, it had to move a lot. You had to travel, go hunt and gather, either hunt things, track it, kill it, prepare it, skin it, drain it, dress it, all that stuff. Or you had to go out and find berries and carry them back, sometimes miles from where your village was. So your body was basically just built to move. That's how it works. And so not moving is really detrimental to it. Eventually, in thousands of years, maybe our bodies will adapt to not moving so much. But at the moment, we haven't adapted like that, and it takes a while for a population to adapt like that. The allele frequency of a generation doesn't change that much, but over multiple generations, the allele frequency can change. And so while humans probably will adapt to some degree if culture remains as stable as it is now, we haven't yet, which means we kind of need to do the things that we've been doing for 300,000 years in order to stay healthy. So that's why exercise and sunlight and around sunrise and sunset is important. And then also eating protein and micronutrients are a great way to keep this baseline high, not dipping down, and also to raise it even further. If you're not taking a multivitamin, take one. If you're not eating enough protein, there are calculators online that can tell you how much. I would err on the higher side of protein than the lower side. There's no downside to it, really. It's not going to make you fat. It's not going to make you bulky or anything like that. It really prevents muscle deterioration, and basically all of the different things in your body, pretty much all the chemical reactions, really benefit from a high level of protein intake. And then, as I mentioned, like, this is how we as humans, as Homo sapiens, have lived for 300,000 years-ish. And our sort of whole branch is like maybe back to around 7 or 8 million years ago. So it's been a long time where we've kind of lived essentially the same way. Only in the last 100 years have we had cars, the internet, all that stuff, which is nothing compared to the 300,000 years previously or the 7 or 8 million years previously. So our bodies just aren't adapted to have air conditioning, have cars, have the internet, lay in bed, watch TV. None of that stuff existed. Everybody and literally everything that people did was movement and being outside and doing different things. And again, because of abiogenesis, we're basically chemistry, and so it makes sense that our body chemistry essentially has been adapted to how life works on this planet. So that's the kind of dopamine pulse part of the hardware. That's one of the layers. The next layer up from the foundation is orexin. So orexin is basically the get up and go signal. So you need this kind of baseline of dopamine in order to like basically do anything at all. This is the kind of signal where you're like, okay, I'm going to actually get off of the couch. Zooming out just a little bit, this is like, I'm going to bounce to this next one just to kind of give you a brief roadmap and let you know where we're going and also make an analogy that might be helpful here. So after orexin, the noradrenaline or norepinephrine as it's sometimes called, it's the mobilized resources messenger. And so zooming out here, these three, it's basically like a car. So the dopamine baseline level is like the car itself. The orexin is like turning on the engine or putting it in drive. So it's like get up and go, we're ready to go signal. So like you can imagine the car, you put the car in drive, it's ready to go. The noradrenaline is like stepping on the gas. So hopefully that analogy makes sense. You need all three. You need the car, you need it to be in drive, and you need to step on the gas in order for motivation to work. The turning on the car or putting it in drive part is orexin. It basically makes it possible to do anything like move toward a direction or move toward an objective. And the basic way that it works is in the hypothalamus, it's manufactured. And then this is how a lot of brain chemistry works, but I wanted to kind of show this because I think a lot of people throw these words out and you don't actually see it. But basically, in the hypothalamus, which is like right here-ish, this is manufactured, and it sends a messenger molecule, these peptides here, to a receptor, which looks like this. And these molecules essentially get docked into these receptors. And basically what that does is it makes you get up and go. It makes you get up off the couch. So it's like the let's go. So it's like putting it in drive. So if you think of like putting your car in drive as equivalent to getting up, getting your ass off the couch, that's basically what orexin does. So you need the dopamine baseline for basically anything to be possible. You need that. If this is too low, you can't get this to activate. This is kind of like your car being out of gas or something. So you need gas in the car. You need the car to exist. And then you need to put it in drive, turn on, put it in drive. That's what this does basically. And with this, you want a balance because you would think maybe that you want to pump this up a ton. But if you push too much energy into a car engine, it will catch on fire or explode or something. So you want just the right amount of energy to where it's like it's humming, it's ready to go, you can rev it or whatever. But too much energy and it would just blow apart and kill you. And kind of the same is true with orexin. You sort of want it in the middle here, and anything too high will cause what's called hypermotivation or a compulsive drive. So this is like binge eating or substance abuse, and anything that's too low will be like depression and PTSD. So if someone has PTSD or was in war or something like that, oftentimes orexin is on the really low or below here spectrum of things, and that can be very problematic as well. But being too high is also problematic. So you want to keep this as best you can in the middle, in the right spot. And we'll go over how to do that in just a second. But before we do, I wanted to go over the last layer. So this is like stepping on the gas. This is like the mobilized resources. Let's do this. So essentially, noradrenaline splashes the cortex, limbic system, and cerebellum, and the spinal cord whenever you need to actually do something or push through something. So it works kind of like a gain knob, or like I mentioned, like pushing the gas pedal down. It's like the intensity meter, or like turning the grill hotter so that there's more intensity on the meat that you're grilling, or a gain knob if you are a guitar player, play music or something, or a gain knob on a microphone. It basically makes the signal hotter. It's again more intensity. So that's what this does. And again, you want to keep it kind of in this level here. If you just stomp on the gas as hard as you possibly can all the time, you're probably going to wreck into something because you're going to lose control of your car. Like a few times it might make sense if you're in a crazy situation or something like that. But if you can imagine like driving to work or driving to the grocery store or something like that, and you're just flooring it all the time, just every time you get in the car, you punch that pedal to the ground. That would be just a ridiculous, unsafe way of doing things, and that's what going too high here is. So how do we control these two things, orexin and noradrenaline? The way that we do that is increasing movement. So the more you move, the better it is. Coffee is a good one. Lots of research on coffee. I've researched this for quite a few years and had a medical thing about a year ago, and so did even more recent research recently on coffee. Turns out it's great. So that's pretty sweet. Protein we already talked about. Novelty is something that I think a lot of people don't talk about much, but you kind of want new challenges, new books, new video games, a new project at work, like that kind of thing. This starts to get out of whack, noradrenaline and orexin, if there isn't novelty to some degree. So if you're too bored and there isn't something new in your life, that can be a major problem for motivation. And then sleep. And again, the reason why this is the case, it's not like people are like, how can we get people to move more? How can we get people to eat healthier or any of that stuff? Or how can we get people to sleep more? Like, the reason those are the answers and they're really boring and they're really expected, but yeah, people don't fucking do them, which is really funny, is because that's how our bodies evolved to be on this planet. We are very survival. Like, an organism wants to survive. And our survival was based on the ability of being able to move, being able to eat, being able to sleep and recharge and regenerate, all of that stuff. And so that's why these are the things. Because in order to survive in this world, you needed to be able to move, and you needed to be able to sleep, and you needed to be able to eat. So if you, a sort of quick cheat sheet, and we'll talk about this in just a second a little bit more, a quick cheat sheet is like wherever your ancestors came from. And I've been researching sort of mine a little bit more. I went to Switzerland, which is where I'm from, a few years ago, and looked at some of the villages and stuff where we came from. And I want to go back and do more because there's one in particular in Austria that we didn't get to go to that is like the very, very specific small village that my ancestors came from. But before that, there was the Urnfeld culture and the Laten culture and the Hallstatt culture. And those cultures did a lot of this stuff. And so a good rule of thumb or a cheat sheet is like whatever your ancient ancestors did for the last 300,000 years, if you do some of those things, you'll probably set your body up well for success. So there we go. Better, hopefully. So yeah, that's just a real good rule of thumb or a cheat sheet for you. Figure out where your ancient ancestors came from, figure out what their life was like, and do some of those things. And that will probably set your body up well for success because that's what your body and biology is used to. Your current body plan is the same body plan that has been effective for 300,000 years of human history. It's not effective in today's society. And it'll be many thousands of years before the human body plan is effective for today's society. And then the last piece here is just energy availability. So none of the stuff we just talked about matters. Oh, I copied and pasted that and didn't update it. But basically, none of the stuff that we just talked about matters at all if you don't have energy in the tank. And so this is another thing that has been a little bit more common, but just to make sure I'm being thorough here, is you want to make sure you front load complex carbs around your hardest thinking windows are like I have a lot of stuff to do for my businesses. I run a number of businesses, and so making sure that I have the right kind of fuel when I'm eating breakfast, and again this kind of sunlight thing, that's the supra chiasmatic clock, is like the body's main circadian rhythm clock. Super chiasmatic nucleus, I think it's called, if I remember correctly. But basically, you want enough energy to be able to do essentially anything. None of this stuff will work at all if you're running on empty. So in order to do that, complex carbs are a good way of doing that. We already talked about protein, but complex carbs are things like rice, wheat, potato. Potatoes are a great one. Sweet potatoes are a great one. Fruit, pretty good. Simple carbs are things that your body just kind of freaks out, basically kind of like sends a bunch of weird ass signals through your body. But it's again nothing new. It's like anything that's like fried, sweets, fries, energy drinks, that kind of stuff. You want this kind of stuff. That will give your body the best energy to be able to do any of this stuff. It's something that like rich people and successful people know, and that's why they continue to be rich and successful, is because they like have the discipline to make this happen. So if you want to get ahead and you want to be motivated and actually achieve your dreams, this is a cost that needs to happen where you're basically eating healthy. Okay, so that's the hardware layer of this whole thing of motivation. The software layer is essentially the psychology that sits on top of this. So if your biology is out of whack, if your hormones and your body chemistry and your brain chemistry is not going well, which is what we just talked about, none of this stuff really matters that much. You have to get the hardware figured out first. So if your computer hard drive doesn't work, it doesn't matter what apps you have on your hard drive or you're on your computer. You need to have your computer functioning first. So the hard drive needs to work, the screen needs to work, the processor needs to work, all that hardware needs to be functioning correctly. And then after that, then you need to install the right apps on your computer in order to be as productive as possible. So the right mail app, the right project management software, like whatever it is that you do in your life. But if the hardware isn't working, the software doesn't really matter, and you can't even use it. So that's why I wanted to talk about the neurobiological stuff first. That's the hardware layer. So software-wise, there's something called self-determination theories. So this is basically like autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So anything that you're attempting that satisfies all three of these really increases intrinsic motivation. And so the mental trick of doing this that I use a lot is basically making everything a choice. It's not like I have to figure out better lead gen for my business. I choose to figure it out, or I get to figure it out. It's sort of the difference between like, if you had to play video games all day, you would probably not want to do it. But because you have to go to work, but you don't have to play video games, it's a choice. It's like a fun thing that you get to do. Then it's far more motivating to play video games. But the people who do it for a living, I'm sure, have other things that they do for fun. The people that I know in QA are definitely that way. I know a video game writer who's that way. Like they live and they breathe it for work. I'm sure a lot of you have heard people who like loved baking or whatever, and then they start a bakery, and then they suddenly kind of like hate baking because it shifts from this thing that I choose to do or I want to do to this thing that I have to do. So this mental trick is essentially doing that in reverse. So things that you really need to do, like things I need to do with my business, I reframe it as things I can do or want to do or get to do. And that's just a mental reframing trick, but it works really well. Another thing that is important here, especially with autonomy, is tracking skill growth. So self-determination theory is all about this kind of feeling of achieving competence, achieving autonomy, how things are related, all that stuff. And so I have been for like probably 15 years now, been doing this kind of a thing where I'll have some sort of goal or where I want to get to, and then I'll essentially work backwards. So I'm going to show you a variety of these. I have essentially, I think, 3 of them going right now. And I've had a lot of people comment on these and talk about them. So I kind of wanted to eventually share them. And this seemed like the perfect opportunity to do this. So this is what my actual daily life looks like. So this is kind of a little bit nerve-wracking to share, but anyway, I'm going to go through it. This is actual real live stuff that I'm actively pursuing. So I, over the years, have had quite a few close friends, and I kind of had this realization a few years ago where I was like, I think I need to surround myself with people who are more aligned with what I want to do. So I want to really do well at entrepreneurship, and I also want to lean into sort of health and wellness, helping people with their health problems or healing or living a better life. Before that, I was in the tech industry, and it was very like heavy business focused in a way where we were trying to maximize user engagement, maximize clicks, maximize time in the app, all that stuff. So I worked at Meta, and I worked at Cameo, and was the head of design and different things, like was an executive and was technically successful and got paid a lot and all that stuff. But what I sort of realized was like, I want to be around people who don't just want to like get a paycheck. I want people who want to build something amazing, because that's kind of how I am. And I want to like push the limits of what's possible and make something incredible that people love to use and all that stuff. And so what I decided to do was kind of change who my friends were as a way of dramatically shifting sort of my life and my lifestyle and all that stuff. I think one of the fastest ways to change your life is to change who your friends are. And I realized that I was hanging out with people who weren't really aligned with who I was and who I wanted to be. And so I decided to change that. So over the last maybe like 3 years, I want to say, I've been trying to build up, and I've managed to get a few, but basically find 10 close friends who are very aligned with me, which means they're entrepreneurial, they are highly skilled, highly talented, highly successful, high achievers kind of people, and very aligned with the same kind of values that I have. And it's been going well and it's been fun. But basically what I'll do then is I'll take that end goal and I'll break it down into steps to get there. And so I basically was like, for now, I'm going to focus on, I have, as you might guess, a decent amount of people who I know who are good at business and entrepreneurship, kind of. But what I didn't have was people who were matching my fitness goals. And I sort of started prioritizing health and wellness, as I mentioned. And so basically what I did, and I'm going to update this in real time so you can actually see my process. Basically what I'll do is I'll break this all down, and then as I accomplish things, I essentially kind of mark them as done. So anything that's transparent is in progress, and anything that's not, doesn't have any fill to it at all, I haven't started yet. So I haven't explored MMA. I'm currently focusing on boxing, which I have done, and I have made some connections there, which has been fun, especially some of the boxing coaches. So this is basically what I'll do. I'll just kind of check in on this maybe like every week or a couple weeks and see how I'm doing with this. And what this does is it really gives me a sense of tracking my skill growth. And it also gives me a sense of autonomy and competence and relatedness. So it really helps all of these things. And so, yeah, boxing community is in progress. Yeah, that looks good for now. I was a member of a climbing gym and did make some connections there. I guess I don't need this one. But have kind of pushed pause on that a little bit, and then haven't started the MMA part of it yet. But that's basically where I'm going with that one. And then with this one, I'm trying to figure out how I can make about $1 million a year. My wife really loves sort of like houses and interior design and watches house renovation shows, and like has never really had a ton of stability in her life. And so one of the goals that I'm trying to do is get a nice house going here in the Bay. And we've had some options so far, but like I think to really go for it and really make it work, this is sort of the number that we need to be at, which is insane. And I'm from Kansas originally, and I grew up super poor, so this seems insane to me. But anyway, the tech industry pays well, but then now I've kind of branched off and I'm sort of starting my own stuff. And so it takes a while to get to this number. any entrepreneur will tell you that it's not like an immediate thing that happens. But anyway, so I'm working on that, and also I can't really talk about some of this stuff because I am working on an app with a co-founder, and it's been going really well. We started it this year, and we already have some users. And anyway, so that's really fun. But I can't really share too much about it at this point. But basically, I have these kind of progress bars that I sometimes put on here too. So I'm working on these two things, and this is the company that I started to do health coaching. And as you can see, eventually I'll get to here. But that's basically like how that works. And then the last one I wanted to show you is kind of a deeper breakdown that I'm currently working on sort of the app we're building. I kind of broke down the skills that I needed and did this first line first, and then sort of broke down how to get there. And anyway, I just kind of mapped all this stuff out and am in progress with it. So I wanted to show that because it's a really good example of self-determination theory. And you also might notice that there's some carrot and stick options here. This is a carrot one. So I get up in the morning and I look at these things and I'm like, okay, how can I make progress on this? What should I focus on? What should I work on next? And I just slowly kind of fill out this map and have to kind of, work on one. And then if something else becomes important, then push pause on it and work on another one. But all that to say, it's been really fun to organize it this way because it feels like I can see the progress that's happening as I develop my skills. I can determine where I want to go. I can kind of break it down and make it digestible. So that's set determination theory. Again, the psychology software part of this. Another one to think about doing is called if-then planning, another carrot one. So this is a pretty widely spread or widely researched tactic, but I haven't really seen it in too many productivity videos or books or anything, which is fascinating. I'm not exactly sure why, because it seems very simple to implement. And so I will do this, which is essentially a little bit what we talked about earlier of like kind of giving yourself a reward when you do something. But basically, you just frame it as an if-then statement. So if it's 7 a.m. and I finish my coffee, then I open and I can't tell you what the app name is right now, but I will hopefully in a few months. If it's 7 a.m. and I finish my coffee, then I open the blank repo and ship one commit before email. So I will just sometimes create a list of those things, and they're framed as an if-then statement. So if this happens, then I will do this. So maybe it's like if I get done with today's UX designs for the new feature we're building by 11 a.m., then I will go get a cup of coffee or something like that. So if-then planning is a very easy way of doing things. It kind of makes the energy that you need to spend or the cost very clear, and then it makes the reward very clear, and you're kind of committing to it by putting it down on paper. So this is a nice mental trick where your brain kind of expects like, okay, cool. If I do this one thing, then I'll get this other thing. Or if I do this one thing, then this other thing will happen. And our brains really like that kind of predictability. So it's a nice hack. Identity reformation is a big one, and it's pretty challenging to do this one. I may do a whole session on this, but I've found with my clients that it really works well. You sort of refactor who you are as a person. So it plays into some of the value stuff we talked about last week. So instead of me being like, I'm a tech founder or whatever, you say things like, I'm the kind of founder who ships daily. Like, what would that founder be like? Am I the kind of founder who's like constantly late to meetings and blowing through the door and like a big mess and has papers falling out and just like is a nightmare to work with because they're constantly changing their mind? And I've worked with some of those people. Or am I the kind of founder who's like got his shit together and comes in and is engaging and ships product daily and does well with investors? Like, paint that picture in your brain and kind of list those things out, and then just say those things about yourself and own that stuff until it actually becomes your identity. And the more vivid of a picture you paint for yourself, the better it will imprint itself into your mind. So for example, I made this AI picture of kind of who I want to be eventually. So this kind of fusion of entrepreneur plus someone who helps with health and wellness. So I'm not there yet, but it's a nice thing for me to work toward. And I made this my laptop background for a while. and my phone background for a while because it just helps keep me focused and motivated on where I want to get to. And again, the more vivid it can be. So like if I'm going to do a behavior or something that day, like is that what this kind of founder would be doing essentially? So you kind of like become the thing in your brain that you want to become. And then by kind of owning that, you then actually physically do become that person over time. Another thing to mention here is that I was very intentional not to find a picture of somebody else, like some famous actor or like the guy in Billions or anything like that, and put that as the thing that I'm trying to get toward, because I think a lot of people do that, where they see some external person that actually exists and they're like, I want to become like that person. Which it's okay to have role models, but like you need to figure out what your own voice and what your own unique stamp is. And so this is a person who does not exist. This is like a photo of future me, basically. And so that's the picture that you want to create. It's wholly you. It's 100% you. It's just a future version of yourself and what that person is like. And that's the kind of identity reformation thing. You don't want to try to be someone else. You want to be essentially a future version of yourself. And who do you want that future version of yourself to be? And really like spend time and think about it. Like I spent probably a week or two figuring that out and then creating this image. And I went through a lot of possibilities before I landed on this one, and it felt right. I'd say I probably created like maybe 30 images or so, trying to make it feel good. And feel like something that I deeply resonated with. So all three of these psychology frameworks that we've talked about so far have been carrots. I'm going to talk about a stick one. I'm not huge on the stick thing, and I think eventually, as I continue to heal myself, I'd like to move beyond using any kind of stick frameworks for myself. That being said, it's been a nice hack that has actually worked from a motivational perspective, and so I'm going to share it with you, as embarrassing as it is. Sometimes having third-party accountability is helpful. I think it's why teams are helpful, and having a boss is helpful, and having a teacher is helpful, having a professor is helpful. I think it's why AA works. I think it's why coaching works. And I think if I'm being really honest, it's probably because not a lot of us have figured out how to be our own parents. As a society, we've kind of like solved survival, so we don't have this pressure of like doing stuff in order to like, eat or have shelter or anything like that. Like society's pretty much solved survival, at least right now, until it collapses. So because of that, we don't have a lot of external pressure. There's not the survival pressure, and then our parents were a big pressure for many of us as we were growing up until we got to college and then moved on into adulthood. But the problem is like, because survival was a nice parent replacement for earlier generations, we don't really have a parent replacement. So what we need to do is figure out how to be our own parents. And I think millennials and Gen Z and Gen Alpha and all those sort of later generations where survival wasn't as much of a big deal, haven't necessarily done a great job of figuring out how to be your own accountability and your own parent. And so what I have done, especially in my case, because my father was extremely hardcore and kind of was always just very directive in telling us what to do, which can be good in some ways. And I learned a lot of things about like resilience and work ethic and stuff like that from him. But the downside is like when you don't have that voice constantly there, like basically ordering you around, you have to learn to order yourself around kind of. And so that's what I'm working on. I'm trying to get to that place. And in some ways I can do it in some areas of my life, like career, it's not that challenging to do that. But then in other ways I kind of need it. So anyway, instead of whining about it and trying to be like, oh, I shouldn't be needing an external thing, I should be my own self-motivator and I should be my own parent and all that stuff. Like I do want to get there and I am actively working on it. That being said, before I'm there, I'm kind of using some of these things as like a hack to leverage that kind of stick or that external third party voice as best I can in the meantime. Again, like very embarrassing to show, but basically like what I did was I really like Alex Hormozy. And so I made Alex Hormozy my laptop background is one example. And that's because when I get up in the morning and I open my computer, I'm like, kind of like imagining him sitting in the living room being like, what would you do? What should you be doing right now, basically? And kind of having that thought of him always kind of present, or kind of looking at all the things that I'm working on. And is it really moving me toward my goals, or am I kind of like avoiding something out of fear, or that sort of thing? Because he doesn't fuck around. He's like a good coach and kind, but he's also very tough and direct and calls out bullshit and stuff. And I like that a lot. So having that kind of manufactured fake fantasized presence, as like a third party stick, kind of a like, make sure that you're staying on track and make sure you're actually doing things that are moving you toward your goals, is helpful. So anyway, I wanted to mention that last one too. There's a ton of research and resources out there on reparenting, tons of YouTube videos. Some of it's BS, as most articles and YouTube videos are, but you can find solid research and research on, solid research and tactics and methodologies and processes for reparenting yourself in a healthy way. And so I would highly recommend doing it. I've gotten a lot of benefit out of it. So that's pretty much it for motivation. To quickly recap, basically motivation is essentially brain math, and you want to kind of figure out how to optimize not only the brain math itself, but optimize your brain for doing the math. And there's like basically two main components to this. There's the hardware part and the software part. And in the hardware part, which is like the car, there's essentially like having the car at all. And so that's like controlling your dopamine baseline. And then there's the putting the car in drive part of it. And then there's the stepping on the gas part of it. And both of these parts are controlled by essentially having your biochemistry in a good spot. And these are the main ways to do that, which is nothing new, but yet people don't really do them. So do them if you want to optimize motivation. And then the last part here is like having gas in your tank. So that's basically like putting the right kind of fuel into your body to even make any of this stuff possible. Doesn't matter if you have a car, doesn't matter if you put it in drive, doesn't matter if you step on the gas, if there's no gas in the car. So that's the hardware part. It's like having a car. This is like the software that's running on your computer, essentially, kind of. I probably should have spent more time and put this into a car analogy also, but I just kind of thought of the car analogy in real time while I was giving this presentation. But anyway, all that to say, mapping things out helps me, reframing it. I'm choosing to do this, or I want to do this, as opposed to I have to do this. If then planning, putting everything into if then statements. If this happens, then this other thing happens. It can be, in this case, there's something that's kind of a reward first, but if I complete that reward, then I will go and I'll do this work thing. You can also have the work element first. So if I complete this work thing, then I will go downstairs and get a cup of coffee. Identity reformation is awesome and super effective. It also takes some time to really think about who you want to become and create that kind of mental image of yourself. And then reparenting, as I mentioned just now. So that's more of a stick thing. So that's the whole thing. Hopefully you got some help and good out of the science of motivation. So if you have any questions about it, I have a website called fitnerds.club. There's some forms on there, especially on the Ghost Church page. You can ask questions there. So feel free to reach out. I answer community questions every month or so, and they've been really fun to answer, and it's been really fun to chat with you all. So if you have any questions, please do reach out to me there. All right. That's it for today's Ghost Church. Again, we're an underground insurgency that's hell-bent on healing ourselves and healing others. If you want to be a part of that, please do reach out. I'm happy to help in any way that I can. All right, peace. Bye.